Love it. More people rolling in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Rachel, I think it's a good time to start. Do you agree?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so hello, Fishbowl. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Samantha Legere, and I am the marketing manager at the career coaching company WOKEN. So I'm here with today's guest, Rachel Serwetz, who is the founder, CEO, and career coach at WOKEN. So we're excited. This is our 8th time speaking on Fishbowl. I can't believe it. But you can follow us by clicking our profiles to be notified of future conversations. So today we are discussing your most pressing and personal career questions. So we'll present and interview Rachel for about 30 minutes and then leave it open to the audience for Q&A for about 30 minutes towards the end. So for this, we welcome participation from the audience by raising your hand to join the stage. You should see a button in the bottom right corner, and I will accept it. So side note, make sure you enable your microphone. We won't be able to hear you otherwise. So yeah, definitely check that in your settings. But now we're going to hear a quick introduction into Rachel's background. So Rachel, take it away.
Yeah, awesome. Just so you guys know who I am, my sort of quick story. I started out at Goldman Sachs and then I moved to Bridgewater. I was in operations and then HR. Bridgewater's a hedge fund, but alongside of my job, I was informally career coaching professionals for years. And that's where I started to really see the patterns and the challenges that people were facing in job searching and otherwise. And then I did coaching training through NYU and got certified through the International Coach Federation. I did a bunch of different career coaching, gigs and jobs and learned a lot of different practices across the industry. I also did a tech MBA at NYU Stern and have been building my own company for almost 6 years now, where we design different tools, different frameworks, and essentially are here to make sure that every professional can be intentional and supported with every single career decision. So that's my quick story. Happy to answer anything about my background, and definitely connect on LinkedIn because I always try to post some career stuff there. But just wanted to give a quick intro to me.
Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so I think we're ready to dive into it. So, first question, what are the most personal, sensitive, concerning topics that people come to you with behind closed doors of career coaching? So, what are these people's biggest career fears, hesitance, or worries?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many. I think, you know, I'll try to bucket a few topics and then we'll go deeper, right? So first and foremost, like jobs are meant to support our life. So the security piece is obviously one of those, you know, underlying needs and kind of that most fundamental need that we have to survive, right? It is a basic, and people want to grow and improve in terms of salary, and everyone's different in terms of where they fall on that level of stress or that level of need for security. But it absolutely is a key component, whether you're not working and you're job searching, or if we're dealing with asking for a raise, promotion, negotiation, or just even determining which career path to pursue, and whether how does the salary component play into your choices and things like that. So obviously money, I mean, it is related to careers, right? We can't ignore that. The other piece is career clarity, right? When someone's trying to figure out their path and their direction, this is something that people typically struggle with for decades. And we have family influencing us. We have fear. We're not sure what to choose. Maybe we're not informed. Maybe we're assuming things. Maybe we're holding ourselves back by limiting beliefs. There's so much that goes on with choosing your direction. That's a big, big, big one. Um, Job search, of course, if somebody is actively searching for their next role, there can be a lot of very common frustration or stress. And, it is normal. Job search is hard. So the difficult feelings around it are totally normal. When you don't get feedback, you don't hear back. And sometimes you get the runaround and, you interviewed in such a deep process and they took so much of your time and maybe you don't move forward. There's so much that goes through job search that can be hard. So that's a big one, right? And then even just in the workplace, if you are working and you're trying to navigate your team, your managers, communication, feeling empowered, feeling trusted, feeling respected, like the culture of your workplace and different situations like that, growing and advancing. Those are some of the big buckets of kind of like the common, I would say, big topics. But I mean, there's so much more to it, but those are just some of the sort of big ones. And I guess the other thing I'll just say too, and I know we're going to get to this later, is the confidence piece, the mindset, and whether it's imposter syndrome or limiting beliefs, and how do you see yourself fairly and sort of place yourself in the world and navigate your actions and your decisions and your professional journey. Sometimes we are the ones that either hold ourselves back and things like that. So the mindset component, there's so many things, and today will be, really an open book, but we're going to try to hit on the things that we see people dealing with most commonly and struggling with. And, that can be kind of the deepest sense of career topics.
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying, there is like so much there that we should go deeper into a few of these. So, first question is, what else do people worry about regarding money and security?
Yes. Let's see. Okay. First and foremost, if you're not working and you're job searching, obviously you need to feel that sense of security of like, what's my runway and how much time do I have and when do I need a job? The other elements are, and I guess we can talk about what these topics are and we can talk about how to handle them briefly, but the main topics are financial runway, asking for a raise, negotiation, and also how do you choose a path. So when we talk about money and security, those are some of the big ones, right? So if you're thinking about financial runway, and you're not working, right? I would just really do the math around like literally what is my budget and what is my runway. And then just remember that with job search strategy in your direction, you can actually account for like, how fast do I need to move? And if you do need to move fast, you may need to just simply look for a role that is similar to the role that you've held in the past. So that's kind of the best way you can optimize your speed. In terms of sort of asking for a raise or asking, getting a promotion, there's definitely a lot we could talk about there, but usually that promotion process is something that people don't realize should happen basically the 12 months before you actually want the promotion. So just remember that it's not just the money conversation, it's actually proving your capability that you can actually literally operate at the higher level that they expect you to. And then that way, when it actually comes time for the raise conversation, it becomes a no-brainer. So that's the type of thinking you want to have with that, is proactivity and really being explicit about your growth plan and chatting with your manager about that. In terms of negotiation, I think people worry about that, but there's definitely, what I would encourage around negotiation is getting comfortable by practicing, right? Having either a mentor, a peer, or a coach give you the steps to both research and come up with like, what are the numbers that make sense, and also the phrasing around how you're going to handle that conversation. So negotiation, while it can be something you may be nervous to do, there's definitely practical ways to get ready. Usually these things are like, I know it's important, but maybe I feel like it's hard to do, right? And so you can totally get around that with the right support, and practice and resources and research and all that good stuff. In terms of choosing a direction, what I always say is, you don't want to only choose it because you think a certain path is like secure. I've seen people who say, oh, this is like a hot trending role, let me go after it. But if you're not good at that thing, or you're not enjoying that thing, or you don't want to get good at it, it's not going to go well for you or the person managing you and assessing your performance. So we can't ignore that every single human has different strengths, affinities, propensities, and potential. And so you can't solely look at a path and make that decision based on solely like what is a secure job. You have to also look at what is secure and what is suitable for me and consider both of those. And the other thing is, especially if you're pivoting, sometimes it's a step back, but remember, what is the future ultimate salary potential? Because sometimes a short-term sacrifice, if you're making a change that will make sense for you in the long run, you want to think about like, where can I take this over the course of time? And is there a way for me to supplement, the income right now if I know this is truly the best thing in the long term? So just make sure you're not only deciding by that piece, but it's just a factor amongst everything else.
Yeah, and actually, I think we can go a little bit more into that. So, like, what else do people worry about when choosing a career path?
Yes. When choosing a path, right? So if we're talking career path exploration, we're talking career clarity, there's actually a lot of very common limiting beliefs or assumptions or just approaches that people, it could be conscious or subconscious, how you're making decisions around what's right for you, what next steps, and what direction to pursue. Um, a common one is the family influence, how people, influence your decision. And, it's funny, we treat our family and friends like each other's career coaches. And that's kind of the way we've always done it. But, we forget that career coaches are real people. And we're here to make sure that you make the best decision for yourself. And even though family and friends want the best for you, sometimes they don't actually know what that is. So you want to make sure you're managing that conversation. And if someone else wants to help you, make sure you know your direction, and then you can still leverage their help in the way that serves you. So be very wary of what people say or advise you, especially a loved one. They may or may not actually know the best way to help you, even though they want to. So you want to be aware of that. I think people worry about, choosing the wrong path, of course, or choosing the right path. And so career path exploration, I often try to define this for people because it's a bit of a new concept that you can actually take a step-by-step process of learning and reflection and doing research and doing networking with professionals who are in your target paths and really compare and contrast your options until you get to that point of confidence. So whether you're nervous about choosing, the wrong thing or the right thing, just what I would do is lean into information. And when you have options on your radar and you learn deeply and accurately about what they are and how they differ and how they relate to you, you will get to that point of saying, okay, this path makes the most sense for me, at least right now. I don't love to choose like the long-term thing and then work backwards because you're going to change in many years and so will these jobs. So what would be amazing for you right now? And so if you're worried about the choice, lean into like, what is my uncertainty and how do I get information to make a better decision, right? So use your uncertainty as a tool to actually help you. We talked about kind of money versus passion, and we talked a little bit about how to kind of reconcile that, right? You want to look for something both suitable and secure. And then, I think people also just, like rush into job search versus being willing to be in the mode of career path exploration. Like, it's okay to be in the unknown. It's okay to say, I'm not sure yet, and I'm actively structuring a process so that I can get more certain before you apply to anything. It's statistically, most people are disengaged at work. And so the examples of the people around us that we look at may not know their best fit path. And so we feel and we think that that's normal. But, I'm sort of here to educate and remind people that it's okay. Like, find a way to make it comfortable and structured and effective and constructive and productive to be in the mode of saying, I'm deliberately exploring and I'm deliberately getting, answers to my questions, and I'm going to lean in and I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to get information and I'm going to reflect, versus being nervous about like, I don't know, and I'm just going to job search anyway, right? That's the normal thing that we like sort of live by because that's the example of what we feel is normal, but it's okay to do it a little differently, right? As long as you have the right support and resources through it. There's definitely probably some others that I'm leaving out, but just remember, whether it's stress or fear or whatever's getting your way in terms of that career clarity, there's always a positive way of reframing that, limiting mindset. So how can you turn that feeling into actually something useful? How can you use that feeling to say, what is the next step I can take to move myself forward, right? So notice where you're at, meet yourself where you're at, and just say, what could be one practical step forward? Where can I get either the help or the support or the information, versus, and by the way, part of this is just recognizing and becoming aware of how you feel and how you're approaching things. So lean into that. We forget that the mindset is so pivotal to this. And I always say your drivers affect your outcome. Your drivers affect your actions, which affect your outcomes. So recognize how you're feeling and how you're approaching it, and sort of slow down to, look at your mindset first, look at your approach, look at your process, and maybe look at assumptions or stereotypes, look at your support system, and make sure you're going about it in a way that's truly going to serve you. And don't always look at what we think is normal, what other people say, what other people do. There's ways you can take control over your path for yourself.
Definitely. And okay, let's say people do what you're suggesting and they know what their next path is. What do they do with job search? What do people worry about during that aspect?
Yes. So job search is another very common challenging time. I think people get really frustrated when they're not seeing results. Um, and so the main reason for that is because, yet again, we sometimes just go through job search in the way that we think we're supposed to. So job search is like a little backwards in the sense that we think that the job search engines and job applications are the tool. But really, statistically, people land jobs through networking. So step number one, if you're feeling frustrated with job search, is how can you learn the tactics that actually are effective? How do you learn how to network effectively and comfortably? How do you learn how to get your foot in the door? So learning how to job search, because if you're frustrated with results, maybe it's your approach, maybe it's your strategy, maybe it's how you're going about it. And remember that you can have mentors, peers, coaches, people around you to actually guide how you job search, right? So look at how you're approaching it, and don't just do the same thing every single time expecting different results. We know what Einstein said about that, right? And I do have a lot of tools on our website, by the way, if you wanted some tips in terms of networking and all that good stuff. So we'll make sure you guys all know where to find that. But you do want to learn how to job search so that you're not just guessing, because that's the frustration. It's like, I'm putting in all this time, I'm putting in all this effort, I'm doing all this stuff, I'm getting nowhere, I'm not hearing back. That means we need to go back to the drawing board and understand, what is job search? How should I even be doing this? We hate that we don't hear feedback, of course, and it is frustrating after interviews. We don't always get feedback, but you can get creative and do your best to try to get that feedback. Or I also have some reflective questions you can ask yourself after an interview, because sometimes the self-awareness is all you need, of like, what could I have done better? But sometimes just know that some things are out of your control. So what can you control? How you spend your time, how you approach the process. I think people get frustrated with being strung along in the process. And unfortunately, again, a big part of this is, what can we control? And unfortunately, we can try to educate employers to run an efficient and effective process on their side, but you have to kind of take what exists, and how do you find that balance of how much time you're putting into the interview process? It's like, we want to prepare fully, but we don't want you to take over your week working on a project per se. Like, maybe you tell them you took X amount of hours, and you tell them, here's the next steps I would have taken if I had more time. So protecting yourself a little bit and finding that balance with how much to put in. It's really tough, because these things do take time, and you want to put your best foot forward. And honestly, people feel burnout. You know what I mean? So it's hard to kind of find the motivation and the resilience and the patience and the persistence. What I would say is, try to make it as enjoyable as possible. If you're networking with people who are in the roles, in the teams, in the companies, in the industries that you're actually interested in, like, what is intriguing to you? What is innovative in the world today? Topics and problems and, areas. Like, say you were going to a conference, like, you would turn to the person next to you, and what would you want to talk about or ask about in the professional world? Go have networking conversations like that, and you'll find interesting work, and you'll find open opportunities. So you can make the networking as fun as humanly possible. And even like, I actually have a blog around why research can help you, because if you're deciding what to look into as part of your research, if you're looking into certain companies or problems or products or services, you're actually actively asking yourself, what am I interested in? And then where can I go find those people who are working on these problems? So in theory, the networking and the interviews should be enjoyable conversations. And if they're not, we can come back to the drawing board. So just notice if you're like trying to check the box and tell them what they want to hear, or like if you're actively saying, what conversation do I even want to have, for an interview, right? So the burnout, can be real, but we just want to try to remember, like, you're a human going through this. There's a real role on the line. And what are we talking about? And does it make any sense for you to even be talking about those things? And, is it something on your mind? Is it something you want to work on? And doing that research, doing the networking, and maybe even doing upskilling, get creative, do a hands-on project. You can find ways to sort of, sometimes I'll say, look at job search as if it's just career development mode. Like, how are you advancing? How are you getting out there? How are you building your network? Sometimes the indirect scrappy methods is actually how you find those openings. So don't be like bogged down in just these applications, which can be difficult. It can be time consuming. It can be stressful, and it's not even the most effective way. Make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. But I'm sure if anyone has questions, they can always ask it afterwards in the Q&A. But okay, so now let's say that we have a job lined up. What else do people worry about when they're on the job?
Yes. So, when people are just in the workplace, right, navigating their team, I think, we always see the results, like the stats of like people leave their manager, right? So it is unfortunately common that managers are not always taught how to be managers. And so that's why they say manage up. You have to know how to sort of not really like control, but get what you need out of your manager. So speaking up and being explicit and putting in place the goals and the plan and, hearing their feedback and really asking these follow-up questions to like truly get what you need out of your superiors. If you're looking to grow, if you're looking for feedback, like they may not know how to do that. They may not do that, often or explicitly or well. So it's okay for you to try to ask yourself, what do I need, and facilitate that. People want to feel trusted. They want to feel respected. They want to feel empowered at their workplace. They want clear communication. There's any number of common issues. There's bureaucracy. I mean, how do we, gain buy-in and influence other people? There's so many, very common normal challenges when you're in the workplace. But, a big one is that growth, advancement, and promotion. And, what I would say here is don't sit around, wait around. This is for you to sort of understand, what do I need to do to facilitate that conversation to get what I need, even if it takes a year? We're going to work backwards. And that way, by the time it comes, promotion time, it's just a actual no-brainer, that you are already at that level, operating. People want to feel heard. They want to feel valued. I mean, sometimes also people feel imposter syndrome, right? Even in their job. So upskilling is an interesting thing where you want to look at like both hard skills and soft skills, and you want to understand expectations of your role. And you want to say, like, both with feedback as well as your own self-review, how do I prioritize what I want or need to work on right now? And trying to be objective and fair with yourself. Imposter syndrome is, you don't want to be overconfident. You don't want to be underconfident. You want to find that happy medium of like, how do I be fair and honest and objective with myself about where I stand? We're all great at some things, good at some things, and not good at some things. But how does that relate to your current role or the future role that you're striving towards, right? So you can even do a gap analysis. And by the way, for any of these topics that I'm talking about, a great tool is just getting visual, whether you're journaling on paper or whether you're doing it in a Google Doc, whether you're working with a mentor, peer, coach, whoever. If you're dealing with like a gap analysis of your skills or whatever it is, career path exploration, all of the different things that we're talking about, use documentation and tools between yourself and whoever's supporting you to push you forward. Where do you stand? What are the questions and what are the next steps? So just the simple act of documenting some of these things can really help others to help you. And of course, it can help you to figure out, where do I stand and what do I need? So imposter syndrome is another common feeling, common challenge that you can absolutely work towards, because we're all a work in progress. We're all growing. It's just a matter of prioritization of like, what's the most important thing I need to work on based on where I'm trying to go, and based on the feedback of like, where do I actually stand with my skill set, right?
Definitely, yep. And so thank you for all that advice, Rachel. We're hitting the 30-minute mark soon. So I just want to say this is just a snippet of what Rachel and WOKEN can help you with. So before we open it up to the audience for Q&A, Rachel, why don't you just tell us one more time about what WOKEN does in case anyone would like more assistance?
Yes. And so just so you guys have our website, it's iamwoken.com, but we are here and we give a ton of free resources. But we want to make sure that every professional has support with career path exploration, upskilling decisions, personal branding, networking, job searching, interviewing, or advancement. That includes the mindset, accountability, and practical strategy. So, yeah, we're here for all the things. We do coaching, we have software, we have digital tools, texting, emailing, you name it. Just making sure you have support based on whatever goal or challenge you're facing at any given time regarding your career.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll get into it later about like if you want to follow us on social media and all that stuff. But for right now, we want to open it up to the audience for a Q&A. So as a reminder, you can join the stage via a button in the bottom right corner, and I will accept it, but make sure your microphone is enabled on your settings. So we'll give you guys, a minute or two to think of some questions, and then feel free to start pressing the button to ask your questions.
Cool. All right, let's see.
Amazing. Okay, invite a speaker.
Yes, let's see. Lena, I invited you up here, so let me know if it lets you join us, Lena. I'll try again. There we go. All
Perfect.
right, tell us your
Can you
question.
hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm passionate for a higher paid job, but also more challenging. That challenging job has much less job security. I think at this point, at my age, for my life, I probably need a more secure job, even though the practice area is not what I'm very passionate about. But the job security is really good. So how could I weigh these elements? And are there any rules that I can follow, or any suggestions, or um, any method of waiving it, or any suggestion of lead me to think further of what to choose. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I guess what I hear you talking about is, choosing between the secure path versus what you're interested in, if I have that correctly, and how to decide kind of between the two.
Yeah. So the more exciting one pays more, and the more secured one pays less. So there's a pay difference as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, look, it depends what security means to you. So you might first and foremost just do an independent exercise to say, here's my ideal salary, here's an average comfortable salary, and here's a, benchmark or like the lowest possible salary I could accept. And then, the other way to think about it is like, where am I at in my life right now? Like some people say, you know what? I need this little extra security right now, even if it's a little less interesting of a job. Or some people say, you know what, in my life right now, I could handle the lower salary and I'd rather have this meaningful work. So the chapter of your life may have, an impact. The other thing is like future potential. Like something might be a lower salary right now, but where could it lead in the future? It's hard to say exactly without knowing the specifics, because how different are they in terms of salary, or how different are they in terms of interest? In an ideal world, you can try to come up with like a happy medium of like, what is something that's like average? Maybe it's not the highest paying and lowest paying, but it's somewhere in the middle. And that could be the same for your level of interest, in terms of maybe it's not the dream thing, but maybe it's not something you really dislike. Sometimes we have to get a little creative and go deeper, and sometimes there's roles we never even heard of. So when you go through the exploration process, you really want to push and see what you uncover, and say, maybe there's like a new option I didn't even think of. And sometimes there's other ways of combining your interests. So for example, I always like to separate role, industry, environment, right? So maybe you're leveraging your skills in your role, but you could transition to a different industry that's interesting to you, or you stay in the industry but you transition roles. So that's another way to think about it. Like, how do I pursue my next step where I can still optimize and go closer to my interests without maybe jeopardizing my security? So there's definitely a lot of options. But the bottom line is, it does take the combination of research, gathering information so you understand the options fully, and then reflecting. And this is a great sort of topic to try to meet with a mentor, a peer, a coach, and just talk it out, because you really need to gauge, like, for the one that's a little lower paying but more interesting, it's like, how much more? Like, it really depends, like, how dire do you feel right now, and how misaligned with your job do you feel, right? So there's sort of levels that you really want to gauge of, kind of how bad things are, how much you need, how much you want, and how different these options are. And is there a third option altogether, right? So there's definitely a process and a little bit of time and effort and sort of iteration, right? You want to iterate through these what I usually do with a client, it's kind of like we're learning, we're researching, we're networking, and then we synthesize what did we learn, and we reflect and we pivot. So when you do that week over week, you're saying, here's what I feel, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here's my next step. And so if you keep doing that, you will get to the point of saying, okay, this feels like a happy decision that I can sort of live with right now. But without knowing some more of the specifics, like a little tougher, but that's kind of the general sort of framework or fundamentals that I might consider to, push yourself forward in terms of knowing how you want to proceed.
Thank you so much. Fully understand. Very helpful. Thank you.
You got it.
Of course. Thank you for sharing, Lena. So I just want to also say, anyone else, if you're kind of feeling hesitant about speaking on, here, feel free to direct message me, Samantha, and I will read your question out for you. So yeah, if anyone else has questions, where you can take a minute or two and just let us know.
Cool. All right. We can maybe just do a little more food for thought in the meantime. And of course, please, let us know if you have questions. Let's see. I'm going to hit a question that we haven't really talked about just yet. And again, Sam or anyone in our audience, please let me know if there's things you want to touch on. But another thing that people sometimes struggle with is the upskilling decisions in terms of further education and what kind of skills should I pursue, or, should I go do this expensive boot camp or get this other degree? And the thing that I'll say about that is, we are in a world where this ongoing learning is almost like the expectation. But doing any sort of school, especially if it's a bigger program, if it's timely or time consuming, if it's expensive, the thing with upskilling or skill development or whatever you want to call it, learning opportunities, is you really want to clarify your path first and foremost. Where do you want to go? What sort of role or industry are you striving towards? And then how does that help you understand what learning opportunities are most relevant or worthwhile? And so the way to figure out what's relevant and worthwhile, after you figure out here's my direction, then you want to do a little bit of research, networking, and reflection. I find that people sometimes just jump into the upskilling choices like, oh, I think that people are valuing Excel or SQL or whatever, and they just like pick a thing and they learn it. But you really want to, again, make sure it's aligned with your ideal direction. And then in terms of the format of how you go learn that, you want to ask yourself, like, should I be like sort of building my portfolio in the sense of doing like hands-on project work, or should I be doing some sort of like course or certification to show that I was trained, in some of those best practices, right? So there's different formats. And by chatting with people who are in those roles, hiring managers, things like that, recruiters, you can really understand what do they value, or, what were some of those common trends of the people that just joined your team recently, and understanding like in reality, what are they really looking for, and what would be most worth my time, and what do you look for, when hiring for this role. So the thing with upskilling is just like, don't just jump into something. I mean, sometimes in periods of our life, I sort of jumped into coaching training without knowing where it would take me. Sometimes when you look at a program and it's interesting to you, if it's not super, super time intensive or cost intensive, you can see where it takes you. But usually you really want to understand your path first, and then say, okay, given all the options of the learning that I could do and the training I could do, how do I prioritize? What would be the best for me, right? So that's kind of just a little quick way to think about the upskilling. You just want to be thoughtful. Even if you take a week, to research it, look into it, talk to one or two people, and there's just so many options out there. So you want to give yourself the time to say, have I actually thought about this enough that I know that this would be valuable based on where I'm trying to go? Now, sometimes we just dive into learning for the sake of it and we just want to do a thing. That's fine. But if you're kind of like, I want to pursue upskilling in order to either pivot or land a certain job, then you really want to do your homework and say, what should I be, what would be the best use of my time, right? Make sense?
Yeah,
All right,
it definitely
we've got
makes sense.
a question here. Yes, Elizabeth, come on up and tell us your question.
Yep, and right after, I have another question someone from the audience sent me.
Great. Elizabeth, can you hear us? We can't seem to hear you, but try to let us know your question and we'll see if we can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, sorry. um, really trying to pivot in my career, how I guess the environment getting laid off or freezes. Is it a bad pivot? Because I wonder if like go back to before bring me like the fulfillment. I didn't have the alignment that I was looking for. Kind of like on the fence,
Um,
and I didn't know what would be
Sorry,
the
yeah,
best.
Elizabeth, you're cutting in and
I
out a little bit. I hear you asking about a pivot, but I want to make sure I get the root of your question. I don't know if it could be your Wi-Fi signal, or want to make sure I can capture it. You're just coming in and out.
sorry. Can you hear me a little bit better? I took off the
Yes,
headpiece.
Oh
So
yeah,
maybe
much
it's
there
better.
we
like,
go.
I think it's probably going in and out with the headpiece. Sorry. I was wondering because I'm a person that's in the middle of trying to pivot in my career. And I'm pretty sure it probably depends on like what it is, what's my background, what I'm trying to pivot into. But I was wondering, like right now, are employers open to people that are pivoting right now? Or are they kind of like hesitant to hire people that are pivoting and probably more likely to hire someone that's been doing whatever it is that they're looking for years out? Because I just don't know if I'm wasting my time trying to pivot now or if I should just go back to what I was doing before
Yeah.
and then
So
maybe
that's
pivot later.
yeah, that's a great question. And this we can add this to our list because a lot of people worry about the market. And so I think it's okay to look at the world around us of what's going on in the world of work and hiring, and is it kind of like within the world of layoffs, like does that make it harder? So I think it's okay to consider that, but to some degree you also have to consider where you're at. So for example, like if you're talking about your job search strategy or direction, I would always start by asking yourself, what is your own personal timeline? Because if you have some time on your side and you really want to make that pivot, I personally think you can and should go after it when the time makes sense for you. But if you're like, I need to land a job quickly, then that would really determine your direction. I think that, in the state of hiring today, like I can see your point why people may want to lean a little closer to someone with just like existing experience. But to be honest, when you're making a pivot, the key here is to really deeply do the networking process so you can set up these informational chats with people who are in the roles that you're considering. Because when it's a pivot, you really have to understand, like, maybe this is a two-step process. Maybe you get into role A and then eventually later on you move into role B. So you just want to make sure that, like, if you're asking about the reality and the realistic nature of making a pivot happen, by learning deeply from the people who are in those types of roles and in those paths, that's how you're going to understand, like, what is realistic and feasible. Like, does this have to be a two-step process? So if you're worried
Mhm.
about the reality of things, I would look at it that way, from the learning angle. And then, of
Yeah.
course, with pivots, you want to do upskilling, you want to do personal branding, you got to do a lot of networking and just deeply understand where you're really trying to go. So there are definitely ingredients that can make a pivot happen. I don't want to say like 100%, that the market is such that you should only look for the things that you've done, because I personally just don't think you should 100% decide just based on like what we think the world is doing. I think you should look at your own runway, your own timeline, um, and understanding the path is going to help you strategize. And also, can you get creative? So maybe you make a slight shift in role that's kind of like a baby step in the right direction, or maybe you make a shift in industry. So there's like still ways to optimize, can I just move a little bit in the right direction? And maybe you do some upskilling, or you sort of still make that pivot happen on the side of your job. So there's so many different options and ways of going about it. It's hard to say like definitively without kind of knowing more, but this is
Mhm.
just a little food for thought to help you sort of come to that plan.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Elizabeth, for coming on here. Okay, so I have a question from the audience. So this person asks, what if you're in a career that you just don't find fulfilling? It does grant me good work-life balance and the work isn't too taxing or challenging, but I do not enjoy what I do. My coworkers try to sell me on, quote, having it good because the role is easy, but it's not what I'm looking for. Is it bad to think that the grass would be greener on the other side, or is it best just to stick in the easy career? So that's it.
Well, yeah. What I would say is, first of all, if it's easy, for you and you don't love it, like there's no reason not to do exploration. The best time to do career path exploration is like when you are working. Now, if you're not working and you're job searching, you definitely can and should explore because the clarity on your path is going to help your job search 100%. But if you're working on the side of your job to run through a structured step-by-step process to understand where you want to go, like let's put it this way, there's no harm of learning. You can just simply gain clarity on like where you want to go, and then we'll see what you want to do about that. You don't have to make a change immediately, but at least you understand your direction. You feel the relief, you feel the excitement around it. Maybe you build your network, maybe you do some upskilling. You don't have to jump ship tomorrow. And guess what? You would also potentially pursue, either you could pursue internal mobility, maybe even staying at the same company but finding a better role, or you could, do an external job search. But nothing is a rush in the sense of like, you owe it to yourself to do that learning. And then in terms of like when and where and what change you make, you would not sign for a new job unless you were excited by it, right? So understanding your direction, and then you could go out and job search. I've seen clients where they'll say no to a job. So you don't ever have to like, don't be worried about like, oh, would I take something that's worse? Like you can interview really comprehensively and talk with people outside of your interview process who work at that company and really get concrete, creative, and comprehensive questions to understand a job before you take it. And also, again, the career path exploration process is literally meant to help you understand what job would fulfill you. So this is exactly the process that is meant to help you uncover what would be right for me before you go do the job. That's what career path exploration is for. So it's there for you to do proactively. It's there for you to get the answers to your questions before you make a change, before you apply to anything, right? So just remember and separate, like you're not quitting just because you're deciding to do exploration. You're just giving yourself the benefit of the doubt, and you're giving yourself the opportunity to say, I realize this isn't my best fit, or maybe it's not as challenging to me. What else is out there? I mean, there's no need for you to stay in that role, that company, and that job forever for no reason. Your careers are very normal in the sense that like career changes are normal, right? Every few years, you're going to want to grow and evolve. You don't have to be a job hopper, but striving for something that will be better suited and more challenging. I mean, that's kind of what we should always be doing at any given time, right? Whether it's within your company or outside of your company, that's what you want to be thinking about is what's next. What would be a better fit? What would be more challenging? And it's possible that like maybe you're a fit for your role, but maybe your just environment isn't challenging you. So again, I would separate role, industry, environment, and really reflect on like, do I align with the day-to-day style of the work, like the day-to-day skills and activities and projects, right? What's aligned, what's not? And then industry is like, do I align with the product or service or mission? And then thirdly, the environment, right? What are the values of the people? And maybe it's just simply not a challenging environment. So you want to ask yourself, like, which of these things am I trying to optimize? And maybe only one or two of those components needs improvement, right? But 100% give yourself that opportunity to at least ask yourself the questions. You may or may not go act on all this stuff, but you absolutely deserve to think through it and explore the information and explore the options. I mean, there's no harm in that, only something to gain from that.
100%. And I hope this answered your question. So we have another one. So someone from the audience asks, what advice do you have for a person who had to leave a position due to workplace toxicity and is now searching for a job? How can this situation be addressed in interviews if asked, and etc.? So thank you for considering this.
Sorry, Sam, say it one more time.
Yeah, 100%. So this person asks, what advice do you have for a person who had to leave a position due to workplace toxicity and is now searching for a job? How can this situation be addressed in interviews if asked? So that's the question.
So it's good that you left a bad situation. I think there's a lot of processing that can and should be done about past workplaces before you enter a job search. So taking a day or a week to like truly feel and process and accept and just sort of handle the feelings around what happened, so that you can enter the job search in a more positive, open-minded, excited way. And that's hard to do after a bad experience, but you do want to take the time to fully just feel, process, accept, and make sense of the feelings. In terms of the job search and how to go forward, you want to ask yourself, like, what exactly might have been the issue? Like, sometimes there's just an industry that is always going to have this situation or this type of culture, right? So was there something about the nature of the company or the industry or something like that? Or was it simply just that company's culture? What I would do is in the interview processes, of course, you're going to be networking for job search anyway, and that's such an amazing way to learn about a company before you're in the interview. Or if you're already in an interview process, go find someone to network with at that company who's outside of your interview process so that they can be objective. And in the interviews themselves, you just want to be concrete, creative, and comprehensive with what you ask. They tell you, they say to you, tell me about a time. You could say to them, tell me about a time. So you want to really elicit stories and facts so that you can actually assess whether they portray the traits that you want to have in a company or whether they portray the traits that you're trying to avoid. So you should analyze what you're hearing versus saying, what is the culture? Or saying, do you have an inclusive culture? It's like, how can you actually get some examples that would prove to you, right? Like, tell me about a time, blah, blah, blah. What would tell you whether the culture has what you need or what you're trying to avoid, right? So get stories, get examples, both in the interviews or outside of the interview process. And just, you can even set up another call. So say you get an offer, set up another chat, ask all the questions you need to ask. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I think sometimes with the toxic situations, it's also good to just look at yourself objectively in the sense of like, was there something you could have done better or differently, or was it purely on them? And I don't ever mean, don't blame yourself if it was out of your control. But it's good to look at two sides of the coin as well and just understand what can I reasonably expect from an employer and how do I go understand this prospective employer fully. That's my quick thoughts, and I'm sure there's more. All right, I think we have a few raised hands, so let's
and
keep going. Yep.
Yep. So we're just going to invite them as speaker, but before we do, I got a question from the audience earlier that I just want to make sure we address.
Sure.
So, yep. So this person asks, I've been a loyal employee with an amazing big boss, but tends to be deployed on different projects, working on a few different teams. So how do you find jobs while employed at a demanding job? Anxious of the current market, but would like to begin to explore and understand my value and competitiveness outside in terms of salary and skill steps. What steps should you take to do this? Is it a good idea to be open with my boss about it so they can provide options of where I might go and keep the door open if a new job doesn't work out? So, examples are not as interesting, have a toxic boss environment, and etc. So just let us know about that. They're also thinking of doing a 2-month break to focus on well-being, kickstart job search.
Okay, well, that was obviously lots of context there. I'm trying to understand the root of it, but if there's an opportunity to chat with your manager about something that may be an issue or a challenge or an opportunity, then 100% I would try to speak up. If there's a situation you can try to fix or salvage, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with how to give feedback. And so if you can try to manage that conversation internally and get what you need so that it becomes a happier situation for you to stay, then I absolutely would always try that first. And then maybe if you want to passively, proactively do a little bit of networking on the side of your job just to see, like, let me build some relationships and just get ready just in case I want to decide to search later. Maybe you can sort of search passively until you feel ready. But 100%, if you have an opportunity to speak up about something you need, I would absolutely always try that first.
Yep, great. Okay, so now if anyone else have questions, feel free to raise your hand. I know we had a few before.
Yeah, I saw a few. I can't remember the names offhand, but please raise hands again and we'll get you up here. I think we had Paul and one or two others. There we
Perfect.
go.
Okay.
All right. Tell us your question, Paul.
All right, great. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the question that I had. I saw that you work in talent management. I'm currently working in talent management and organizational development, and I was looking at different MBA programs just to further my career. How closely is like academia and and like the current job market, how closely are they tied, or how much respect is given to the research that's being done there? I'm just interested in the overlap and how much that would help me in my career.
Sorry, the research on?
The research in like organizational development, talent management, IO psychology, those types of fields.
Oh, in an MBA?
Yes, correct.
That's a good question. So I did an MBA. It's obviously a very like well-rounded way of understanding businesses. You might take, I mean, depending on the program, mine was a 1 year sort of fast track, but typically it could be 2 year, or it could be 2 year full time. It could be part time. So you may have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 electives, right? Like, of course, there's the core curriculum where you're going to understand management and strategy and leadership. And then maybe you have a few electives where you can sort of opt into things like that. But Paul, I actually think it's a really, really important question because, even for myself, I love the topics you just mentioned. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that would have been a really different path to go get a degree that's specific in those topics. So if you're debating any sort of, master's degree, I would really deeply understand the differences, and I would chat with people who have done both of them. And most importantly, I would ask yourself, what role do I want after this degree? Right? Like, there's different ways you could do it. You could say, where do people typically take this degree? A, you could ask that of people who have done it. Or B, you could say, what do I want? And then which degree is going to get me there? Because there's definitely really specific roles that you would go do with like an IO psych degree that I don't think like an MBA actually would really set you up to do. And so they're similar, but I actually think they're different enough. Meaning, a master's that was specific in those other topics are going to be way narrower, way deeper, way more specific in those research areas. And MBA is very well rounded in the sense that you're going to get a little bit of everything about a business, right? Is that answering your question?
Yeah, it does. And specifically, like I'm looking at like what they're teaching for like change management at Wharton, and I'm looking at like what the professors are publishing, and I'm asking myself, okay, like if I apply different consulting agencies, like how would this help me? Like in that, like are they paying attention to this, or are they using their own models? I guess that's like the specific thing that's going through my head.
I see. Okay, well, if you're trying to understand, like, okay, if it's a consulting job and you're trying to understand what they value, like either what frameworks they use, or what education they value when they're hiring people, those might be two different questions. So when you chat with the consultants, if that's the job you're looking at, you could ask them, what frameworks are you using? And B, you could ask them, like, who are you hiring, and like what degrees, what education do they have, right? So I think you have a lot of kind of components to your question, and networking is going to get you a really far way if you can meet the people who are in the roles, in the companies, in the teams that you're actually trying to learn about. Because depending on the type of role, you may or may not need a certain degree. One degree may be more helpful than the other. They're definitely different. So I would ask, like, what is their view of these different degrees? And you could say, like, who do you hire? Who were the last few people you hired? Like, tell me about their background. Versus if you're trying to understand like their day to day, what frameworks do they use and where do they get those frameworks? You know what I mean? And you could try to do a little comparison of like, go meet people who just graduated from those degrees. And if you're trying to understand, like, will they use the things I learned in school? I mean, you could literally do the comparison of like, what are some of the frameworks these people are learning, and then go talk to the consultants, right? If that's the question you're trying to ask. But I think there's a lot of components to, like, when you're looking into a master's, it's kind of like, what else am I going to get out of this? You may learn frameworks that they may or may not use on the job, but you're going to get, the credibility. You're going to get the hiring process out of it. You're going to get the network out of it. You're going to get the personal experience out of it. You're going to have probably the opportunity to do your own projects and research. So with master's degrees, sometimes you just want to look at, like, what am I getting out of this? Why am I doing it? And then, I know it may sound silly, but they may or may not use exactly what you learned in school. But if that's your concern, then I think you can tackle that question directly by networking with both the students or alumni and then the consultants themselves.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Rachel. Yep, that answers my question. Thanks.
Great.
That's great. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question by Hema, if it's really quick.
Hi.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
sorry. I think you accidentally dropped. Let me just invite you back as a speaker. Here we go. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. My question was around career progress. So if I'm a senior manager now and I want to switch jobs and go to the next level, like as a director level, how does that switch work? I mean, what are the key drivers that I need to focus on to make that happen? Can
Yeah.
you provide me some guidance around
Yeah.
that?
So if you're trying to get a promotion at your company, the first thing is being explicit and having frequent, explicit conversations with whoever's above you. And you want to do that about 12 months before the performance review conversations happen. So once a month, you can have these conversations. But the first thing you want to do is say to your superior, what do you need to see from me to reach the next level? And you, with your manager, need to literally write down the set of goals, whether it's feedback they have or whether it's stretch opportunities that they have to give you. You need to be sort of given the chance to prove and stretch to operate at that higher level. And sometimes they need to give you those projects or opportunities to do it. And so it could be feedback, it could be new opportunities, but you agree to a comprehensive plan and a
Rachel?
comprehensive set of goals explicitly. It has to be super, super clear because sometimes
Rachel?
they give you feedback and the feedback sometimes is just not clear. And then you want to check in on that plan over the course of the next several months, and so as you start to implement it, right, then you want to see what they say, and they may have ongoing feedback. And if you keep simply developing towards those goals and you're getting feedback and they're saying what you're doing well, what you're not, and you're constantly working towards it over the next 6-12 months, by the time it comes like formally the performance review time, then you really want to be operating at the level and understanding the expectations of how is somebody measured at the director level. And you want to know that you're operating at that level and grow towards it and actually showcase and prove that you're operating at that level. And that way, when it becomes a question of should you be given this title, it's a no-brainer because you're already doing it.
Thank you for that. My question also was about switching jobs to a different company. And
Yeah,
how do
so
I?
I probably wouldn't shoot for a more senior title when you're externally job searching.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's impossible, but think about anyone hiring anyone. They're
Yeah.
probably going to bring you in at the same level. And then the best way of growing seniority wise would be internally within your company. I'm not saying it's impossible, but like that is, think about hiring, right? Well, how and why and when would somebody sort of take a chance to promote you when when you were at a lower level, at your former company?
Got
Think
it.
about it from the hiring manager's perspective. You're likely going to come in where you are, and then any growth or promotion is usually when you're in a company and you can navigate promotion, right? Does that make sense?
It
It's
totally
not
does.
always the case. Sometimes people are given the chance and given the opportunity to lead, and like sometimes it happens, but I don't want anyone to really waste their time expecting something that's a little hard to do. I see we have another question, but we are towards the end here. Sam, I'm sure we have some wrap up notes that we can share with folks.
Yeah, of course. So first, thank you everyone for sharing your questions. So I just wanted to quickly say, Rachel, where can people connect with you in Woken if people want to continue asking you questions?
Yes, IamWoken.com. Please follow us. If you follow our socials and our emails, we always try to run, free events and free resources. And we'll be back on Fishbowl with a series every 2 weeks for the next few months, diving deeper into all of this. And yeah, LinkedIn, please connect there. And I always try to post. And you can email, you can message me on LinkedIn, you can reach me however you can reach me, but our website, we always offer a free initial one-on-one call if you want to chat about your situation. So we're here to help, and I know we'll be back in a few weeks on Fishbowl as well.
Yep, we'll actually be back it's going to be called the Career Living Room series. Our first one is September 5th. So if you guys have any more questions that we didn't get to today, please come to those and feel free to ask them. Okay, well, this is the end of our discussion. So thank you all for joining. And yeah, if you want to please follow us, you'll be notified of the future events we have. So thank you so much.
All right, bye guys.
Bye everyone.